2. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Second. Oop.
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 So we have 2 decisions that are ready for us to vote. The first decision is in the case of 3141 Kathleen Ferrara, 115 Fox Hollow Lane. I'll make a motion to approve the decision as written. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second.
And all in favor of approving the decision as written in case number 3141 Kathleen Ferrara, approving the variance request, say aye.
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 So I'll record that the vote is unanimous in case number 3141 to approve the decision as written. And then we have case number 3143, Sarah Tershwell, 84 Ann's Lane. I'll make a motion to approve the decision as written by legal counsel. Can I have a second?
Second that.
Second.
And all in favor of approving the decision as written in case number 3143, Sarah Tershwell, 84 Ann's Lane, approving the variance requests, say aye.
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 So I'll record the vote as unanimous, approving the variance request in case number 3143. So then we are on to our first pending case, which is case number 3133, combined with case number 3134, 10 and 12 Squabble Lane, but I do not believe the applicant is here to present, so why don't we just come back to those and go to case number 3132, Lee Kruder, 370 Great Plains Lane, where I believe the applicant is here to present.
Chair, I also have people on Zoom. I have InterScience and I have Hollander Design.
Oh, maybe it's not.
Could that be, maybe we were unaware that they were appearing via Zoom, so sorry about that. Why don't we go back to case number 3133 and case number 3134. Thank you, Antoinette.
Is that InterScience?
InterScience is case number 3133 and case number 3134, 10 and 12 Squabble Lane.
Hello, it's Jim Walker from InterScience for Michael and Annie Falk.
Hey, Jim.
Hi. Since the original public hearing, we've been asked by Chip Voorhees to submit a plan. It took me a while to get a plan submitted, but the plans are in front of you. We also have received, since the last time that I spoke to the board, we have a wetlands permit issued by New York State DEC dated September 15th. So you now have everything that we were asked to provide. There's a common reed management project, selective cutting in the water. It's the easiest part of the project. We cut the common reed in the water, and eventually with ice and high water, the common reed will die and it'll turn black and the rhizomes will crumble. So that part is the easiest part. The part above the mean high water line will be selective cutting, and this is routinely done in the village of Southampton and in New York State DEC jurisdiction. And we're going to cut the common reed, and we're going to get the native plants, including cattails and three square rush and other related species to establish. This is what we would call passive restoration. Above the wetlands line, we have various wetland shrubs and plants proposed. These are blue flag Irish, Joe Pyeweed, soft rush, cinnamon fern. Those are parts of the passive restoration. But then there are native shrubs that will also be planted. There's an existing fence on 12 Squabble Lane. and we would like to retain the fence. On the other property, there is a fence that goes high up into the property, and it looks like an area that was used to put landscape debris over the years. And what we're doing instead there is we're installing a new fence, and we're planting new wetland shrubs and buffer plantings above the wetlands line and installing a fence. Now, this property had been managed prior by Bruce Horwath with pretty good success. And the only problem was for the people that were on Wickapog Pond shoreline that had the permits to do that work was it wasn't continued. So the problem is finding property owners that are willing to continue the maintenance and keep cutting the common reed down until the whole thing succeeds. And that's what you see on your the plans by the landscape architect. LaGuardia Design shows plantings on the uphill side of the fence as well, and that is to hide the fence so they don't look at it. It's mostly marshmallow. Marshmallow is already present there, and it's in pretty good shape. So what we're going to do is add to that. And the deer fence should be obvious. It's to encourage the deer to run along the shoreline and not in the landscape portions of the property. There are two areas that need other attention, and those are root barriers on the north and south property of 12, north side of the property for 12 and the south side of the property for 10. And that is self-explanatory, but what it does is it prevents the common reeds from coming back across the property line and reinvading the new wetlands. When Bruce Horwath did the work years ago, it was very successful. There was a huge amount of freshwater wetlands vegetation that came back, and I went down there and looked several times. I don't really recall why, probably because I had clients in the area. But we're going to try to get that situation back in play, and we have two property owners that are willing to pay for the maintenance that's required for these kinds of projects. So Michael and Annie Falk should be thanked in some respect, because this is a good environmental positive project. I think we have given everything to the board that Chick Voorhees has asked for. So we would encourage you to close the hearing and issue a permit so that we can start the project, say, in January, February this year, using the New York State DEC permit and the village wetlands permit. I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Chick, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. What Charles suggested earlier. I thought it'd be helpful also to kind of supplement Jim Walker's presentation by going back through some of the materials that we had talked about very early on. Jim submitted a very conceptual plan, and so we had some discussions in April and May, and it's been adjourned ever since then while he was getting the input of the landscape architect. But at that time, we had suggested the root barriers on each side of the property to prevent Phragmites rhizomes from coming into this property. That is now shown on the plans, as Jim said, but that was one of our original requests. We had also requested that the wetland line be updated. So that was flagged by InterScience, checked by my office, and has been verified, again, since the April and May meetings. We asked them to inventory the existing vegetation on the property so that we were ensuring that we considered materials that were good and native and could retain them as part of the restoration plan. That has been done. You can see existing trees shown on the property, and also the narrative talks about the selective cutting and how that'll be handled. We also asked, based on an original plan, if the buffer could be expanded. Keep in mind that this is a voluntary restoration of wetlands to try and increase the productivity and make it more environmentally beneficial. But since the alignment of the original restoration, Jim and his team did expand the buffering. So I thought that was a very good responsive aspect of their resubmission. We also asked that they not only inventory the existing vegetation in the wetlands, but beyond, and that has been shown as well. So I don't have any further questions. I do have a landscape ecologist on staff that specializes in these type of restorations. That person read the narrative, looked at the submission, looked at the plantings to ensure that they're native, and we feel it's a very good restoration, well thought out, responsive to what we had requested, and I have no further questions.
Chair, I actually have his hand up. Chick, that must be your associate. His hand is up on Zoom. I don't know if you want him to come in or not.
Oh, I'm not sure if he is at the meeting, but...
It says Chick Voorhees and the hand is up.
Oh, that may be me.
Okay.
Charles and his team suggested I may want to use Zoom and display material, but that's probably me.
Antoinette, do you have anybody from the public who might want to be heard?
No, no other hands are up.
Okay, so then I think we can motion to close cases 3133 and 3134 for all purposes. Can I have a second on that motion?
Second that.
And all in favor of, for the time being, close cases 3133 and 3134, 10 and 12 Squabble Lane. Can I have a vote on that? I'll vote aye to close these two cases.
Aye.
Aye.
Julia
Aye.
and Susan?
Aye.
Okay, so
Aye.
that's unanimous. We'll close, and Chick, you'll prepare the,
Yes, you're also
Wetlands
directing me
permit.
to prepare a permit. I'll
100%.
prepare a draft permit for the next meeting.
yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. So we'll move to case number 3132, Lee Cruder, 370 Great Plains Lane.
Okay, I have Hollander's Designs hand up. Melissa, did you want them to come in?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I guess you didn't make the plan.
No, she didn't make the plane. Unfortunately, our landscape architect, who was supposed to be here today, all right, Melissa, I'm just going to tell them. Her son emptied out her pocketbook. She lost her license, her driver's license and credit cards at the hotel. Long story short, she's still trying to fly out of Detroit, but she's able to join us by Zoom, so it's great.
Yes.
Hi, Melissa.
Yes. I hope everybody can hear me. Yes. Thank you. Thank
So-
you for that, Melissa.
Oh, no problem. Melissa Dedovich, Peconic Environmental. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Cruder. I'm joined by Melissa Rivas from Ed Hollander Landscape Design, as well as a lot of Eds. Ed Siegel, the architect for the project. As you may recall, and actually Melissa's going to be showing you on the thing, I just wanted to put this out here too so you had a paper print. We've been in front of this board now, I think, only really once, but we've been reviewed since April, May. Over the course of this project, we've made significant changes to the plan. The last changes that we made were requested by the board, were to the wetlands buffer. We've actually increased the wetlands buffer that's immediately adjacent to the man-made pond. We've enlarged it by an additional 5 feet, so it now has an average width of 55 feet to be established as a covenanted non-disturbance, non-fertilization wetland buffer. That increases the area of the buffer that was originally 20 feet back when they got their last wetlands permit to now 15,342 square feet. And you can see that shown now on the plan. You want to just zoom in a little bit, Melissa?
Sure.
Because the other purpose, we were also asked if we could take another look at the pathways that were in the buffer. Originally, we had more pathways, and they were a little closer to the wetlands. We've now reduced the pathways. They're only 4 foot wide, and they've also been shifted further upland. We have a net reduction of 72 linear feet of pathway. So originally there was 285 linear feet, and now it's 213 linear feet. We've also, if you want to, if you could now point us to the landscape, natural landscape area. So during this process, it was brought to our attention that apparently during one of the older reviews and older permits that were issued in 1997 for the swimming pool, not only was there a requirement for a 20-foot wetlands buffer, but there was discussion about a 50-foot natural quote-unquote landscape area, which to this date, neither Chick and I understand what it means. So when we met on site, where we didn't understand what the purpose of it was or anything, because environmentally it doesn't seem to make sense, but either way, we weren't made aware of it until this whole process started. There was a certificate of occupancy issued June 28th of last year to the current owner when he purchased the property. Again, not aware of this. There were no violations issued in the title report. My company wasn't involved in the purchase of the property, so we hadn't done a FOIL. And actually, during this process, too, we did file a FOIL, and then we were brought the copy of the original approved map, which showed the 20-foot buffer and the 50-foot landscape area. But there was nothing about a violation. I don't think, Chick, you had the same situation I did, where the violation wasn't found until we actually physically asked to see the file, which I think was June or July, where there was a piece of paper that's from John Foster stating that. So that being said, we've now come around, and actually we would like to revegetate that area. So we would like to reestablish a 50-foot wide natural landscaped area as planted with native plants designed by Ed Hollander's office. And that results in an additional 4,579 square feet of native plantings. The lawn that's currently there as well, since we're going to be doing site drainage, a new geothermal and everything, we would also like to replace the existing lawn that's remaining, which would really reduce the lawn area here, with a native fescue mix. So in essence, we're increasing the buffer by now making all the lawn and the wetlands buffer native plantings. Melissa, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, that was a pretty good overview. The only other landscape change that we made was to the fencing, but I don't know if you're
That's
still
next on my
getting
list.
to that, or if you'd like me to address it. Okay.
Yeah, actually, well, there was a question, do we want to zoom in on the fencing? So there's a question about the fencing along the driveway that's to the west of the property that leads to the back flag lot. And we actually went out, and Melissa, could you show the photographs?
Yeah.
And we submitted this to the board. We actually had that property line staked out to confirm that the trees in question were on our property. And we submitted an 11 by 17. Do you have that, Melissa? There we go.
Oh, is it not showing?
Oh, no, now you have it. So if you zoom in on the upper right-hand corner, you can see the stake there next to the call box. And that's the property line is pretty much 2 feet off of their driveway. So all that vegetation is correctly shown on our original survey and is on our property. However, just to be helpful, we've actually decided to install the new fencing about 10 feet off the property line and inside the existing fencing, which will be removed. The existing fencing is pretty much wire fencing. You can see it right there, actually in the lower, yeah, right there. So we're going to actually install it inside from there. And we will maintain the southern fencing that's along the property line between us and the flag portion of that property. Ms. Stevenson had a question about the if we could go to the FEMA, the zoning compliance map.
Sorry, there's a little delay.
It's okay.
There you go.
And can you zoom in on where the FEMA is on the existing house? So Ms. Stevenson had asked how much of the existing house was actually currently within the FEMA Zone AE9. And it's on the survey, but we can show it right here. It's about 32 square feet, which with the existing house is about 3 floors of square feet, 3 floors of the house. So we just wanted to point that out. With regard to the other structures, we're not making any changes from last time we spoke with this board. We're still asking for the front yard relief to maximize the wetland setback. I did provide an answer of 5 criteria for requesting that relief. I can go through it again, but it has been provided in written form. The main reason is really to improve the environmental conditions. Again, the proposed house height is going to be 29.7 feet, where 35 is allowed, and the current house is 33 feet. And the other variance, again, we were asking for is for the open-air pergola, which, if you combine it with the 20-foot wide flagpole, then it actually exceeds the 30-foot required setback. We feel the pergola, it's open to the air, it's open on the sides, it's just, and it's as far away from the wetlands as possible, so it's between the swimming pool and the driveway to the west. Want to go to the next picture? We can talk about the planting plans?
Mm-hmm.
Or which one do we have next? And this is just our overall drainage and a grading plan. Again, we're going to be improving the septic system. You also should have gotten the updated wetlands setbacks, which are the same. I added onto that the proposed buffer area for both the natural landscaped area and the wetlands buffer. Melissa, you want to go over your plantings?
Yeah, just really one thing to note here, that the last time we were in front of the board, Chick made a really good note about limiting disturbance to habitat within the wetland, and so we really took that to heart, not only in the reduction of paths, but we went through and we added a lot of native shrubs as well, so that we could provide more shelter for native fauna in this space. So we've added additional planting to the buffer since we've last met.
I also want to add that in our original application, I don't know if this got lost in translation, we did provide the board with a tree inspection plan done by Bartlett tree experts, they inventoried the 5 cherry trees that we wanted to remove because they're in poor health, and they did a whole inventory and agreed with us, and they had been maintaining the property for many years. Melissa also had provided a timing and methodology for the wetlands buffer installation. You want to go over the natural landscaped area, the planting plan?
Right, so again, since we last met, we added planting to this natural landscape buffer area. This is 50 feet of planting on this northeast property line, and we're taking a lot of the same material we were using in the buffer and extending it. So this is just a natural extension of the remediation we were already doing here.
And then do we have the radius map next?
Yes.
Okay, and here I just want to, it's kind of hard to see on this, just point out where the property is.
Do you want me to zoom in?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I just want to remind the board that when our client purchased the property, can you go to the drainage area? And I don't know if any of the board members are able to go to the site. We've actually staked out the drainage area. Our client, when he purchased the property, had thought that he owned all the way to the hedgerow, which we've talked about the last hearing. So that area, that width, that's 20 feet wide, correct?
Correct.
Yes. So that 20-foot wide area is going to be allowed to passively regrow, and then we're doing the 50-foot on top of that. So what we're almost with between the wetland area, the landscape area, and the pond, almost 45% of the property is going to be native natural area. And I also wanted to show, do you want to show where the southern fence line is, just so they understand the area that we're going to be keeping, that one southern fence? Yeah, right there. And that's just going to be maintained. And we're here to answer any questions from the board.
You said, do any board members have any questions? Julia, Susan, do you have any questions, Luke?
No, I have no questions right now.
Oh, not now.
Julia or Susan, do you?
Not now, Mark.
Okay, so the question
I'd like to hear Chick's comments on the plan at this point.
yeah, why don't you go, Chick?
Sure. So this does have some history. My notes show that,
You might have to step
You
up.
want me to go up there again?
thanks, Charles. There was quite a bit of history. My notes show that we had originally adjourned this in May. There were some discussions that involved having the applicant seek a front yard variance to expand the setback to the wetlands. You may recall the original application met the 80-foot setback, but the house was rather close to the wetlands. So we further discussed it, talked about looking to comply with setbacks as much as possible, or comply, seek a front yard setback, which they have done, expand the natural buffer, and then research that 50-foot easement to the east. So we did receive updated surveys. There was a resubmission. The property was reposted, and Melissa's presented it this evening for, basically documenting all of those changes. I think it would help, and I hate to put the burden on the applicant, but there was a really helpful comparison chart that is part of our record, but I think it might be good for Melissa to go over that here at the meeting, just because, there's existing sanitary systems, there's proposed drainage, there's expanded buffers, and that information is good to have on the record, not only in the file, but in the written record. We did meet at the site, inspected the property, and, some of these changes were based on that. We do have the timing and methodology information. We also researched the 1997 decision, and there was a 50-foot, I will call it a buffer, and a buffer along the wetlands. And if you read the minutes of those meetings, the plan was modified, and those areas were intended to remain unmaintained. There was no planting plan at that time in 1997. We obviously look at things a lot more carefully currently, and at least from the standpoint of looking at the existing environmental conditions compared to what's proposed, we're getting the full 50-foot buffer next to the property line, which will benefit the wetlands, without a doubt. And it's going to be a planted buffer. The house is being moved, and we're also getting an expanded wetland buffer adjacent to the actual wetlands. So those are all things that they're part of the record, but I think it's useful to understand that the nature of that original decision was just to leave things unmaintained. It appears as though that wasn't done. It looks like the lawn is cut, and there were some aspects that weren't adhered to from the original decision. But as Melissa said, that was a prior owner, and there was really nothing that came up that would have notified them other than reviewing the full building department file. And I think we established that tree removal was done based on arborist information. There are some mounds on the property, but all that will be addressed by the updated landscape and restoration plan. So I've reviewed the drainage plans, the landscape plan for planting, and they have responded to all of the comments that I had. As Melissa, she's also Melissa, right? Hi. Even the newest plan removes some of the pathways and reorients them in a way that is responsive to what I had requested previously. So there may be some additional questions, some additional input from the public, but at this point I wanted to indicate that they've been responsive, that there's a good plan. It does improve the environmental conditions, although it doesn't fully comply with the setbacks according to the village code in chapter 116. We do have an existing house on the property that's being demolished and basically setback with a front yard variance to try and meet the setbacks as much as possible. And there are extensive buffers that don't currently exist. So that's my input at this time. I don't know if, Mark, you want to hear about, I thought that setback comparison chart was useful. We do have it in the record, but Melissa can go into it in more detail if it's helpful.
Actually, what I'd also thank you for the check. The only thing I'd like to also state is that this property, which is unusual in this area, is actually undersized for this area. It's an R120, and this is a 70,785 square foot property that's also impinged with a man-made pond. So we really have tried to balance working with this board to get a reasonable, again, this house is not maxed out in size or height. The other thing I'd like to add that I forgot in my presentation, and Melissa forgot, is that if you combine the 50-foot new area, naturally planted area, we actually ended up with an average 75-foot wetlands buffer. So if we were to, if the board would want, we could covenant that. Now, remember, the original wetlands buffer for the pool, it was not a buffer per se, it was just a net, but we after planting it, we are more than willing to covenant both the 55-foot average width buffer as well as a naturally landscaped area, if that would make the board feel a little better about all this.
Since the lot is undersized, did you qualify for 4/10 relief?
No.
Because of the street width. Got it.
And I could go over some of the setbacks. I mean, our village, our existing let me see, sanitary system was 105 feet. We're now 128 feet, and it's also going to be an IA system. The house was originally 34.8 feet from the wetlands. It's now going to be 55 feet from the wetlands. We have the driveway gates, which are just being replaced along the road. The driveway at the dry wells are all being reset. The geothermal system is being reset. The main thing was the house, moving the house away.
The two concerns I have are significant concerns to my mind. First, the property is in violation.
We were not aware of that until.
No, I understand that you weren't
Right.
aware of it,
But
it is in violation.
But isn't the fact that as I was talking to my associates, we weren't aware of this, the client was not aware of this, the client's closing it, we didn't represent the client, the attorney didn't aware of it. So how are we supposed to be aware of this? That's number one, but number two is, aren't we, by us being here, rectifying it, because we would need a wetland special permit anyways to do the work. So I think this is a win-win for both the village and for our client. And again, we're willing to covenant the buffer that was established for the swimming pool, which is only 20 feet, was not covenanted, actually. So now you're going to have a 55-foot covenanted buffer along with the additional native planted area, which ends up in an average width of 75 feet on a very small lot. Again, 45% of the property is going to be natural.
No, I understand. So the question I have for either you or Chick is, and I understand you were not aware of it. Okay. I
I'm
can't
not a
say
mind
that-
reader.
Okay, I can't, but it's in the file, okay? The reason why we're aware of it is because there's a file that has a decision from the zoning board that required compliance with a condition, and in addition to non-compliance with the condition, there was a letter issued by the building inspector notifying the prior property owner that the property violates this condition or does not comply with this condition.
Right.
It's in the file. It
But-
wasn't hidden.
But
It
what I'm
wasn't
saying,
not
but Mr.
available.
Chairman, is that when a person purchases a property and they hire an attorney to do the work and they hire a title report and everything and they get an updated CFO and it all comes back clean, I'm hired to go for a permit for a new house. We don't necessarily, even if it was, we don't necessarily go like, my job is not to be the watchdog and say, and we did file a FOIL, and when we got the first FOIL back, which was on a flash drive, the letter wasn't on it. Didn't come to our attention until I think our first hearing.
No,
So
yeah,
that's
and
what
and I'm not
so it's-
saying, I'm
right.
not highlighting whose fault it is, but the property itself is in violation, so the,
So in order
the
to
resulting
rectify it,
question is,
right,
regardless of whether you were going to propose a new house, what would be the way to remedy the violation? What would the property owner be required to do?
exactly what we're doing right now. Am I correct, Chick? We'd be required to bring it into conformance, which would be getting a wetland special permit, providing a planting plan, and again, we're willing to go above and beyond and actually covenant it. We're not just saying we're going to plant it and then, so,
We're in agreement. Okay.
Yes.
What you're doing is curing the violation. It's complying with an existing condition.
Right.
Okay, with respect, which is great. But why can't you comply with a 50-foot wetlands buffer? We never used the term average buffer. Okay. From the very beginning, this board suggested to the applicant that they provide a 50-foot wetlands buffer. Okay. Not an average buffer. Okay. The board wasn't asking for that. The setback is actually 150 feet. At our last meeting, okay, the board's request was, please demonstrate to us why you can't comply with a 50-foot wetland setback. Okay, you're building a brand-new house.
a 50-foot wetland setback, or you mean
Yes.
buffer?
Buffer, yeah.
But-
That buffer. So instead of complying, now you're 40 feet from the wetlands, and you're suggesting, okay, but we'll fill in other areas and we'll have an average 55. The board's not asking for an average buffer.
Well-
The buffer works if it's a certain width, to my mind, not an average buffer. I don't understand why you're not basically just complying with a 50-foot buffer.
The reason
And
we
let me finish.
okay,
And, okay, the board was accommodating enough to say, maximize your wetlands buffer, and if you need to, move the house closer to the road. Okay, you don't have to comply with 80 feet. And you still came back with a 60-foot setback from the front yard and 40 feet from the wetlands. And I didn't understand.
do you want us to make it 50 feet from the road?
No, we want it to be 50 feet from the wetlands.
The house.
Minimum.
The house?
Yes, minimum. I thought that was clear at the prior two meetings.
No. The house is 55.
The buffer.
But, all right, Mr. Chairman,
Because really the setback, I'm sorry,
Right.
to clarify the language.
That's-
The setback is 150 feet. You can't comply with that. Okay, so the requirement is, since you can't comply with that, create a minimum 50-foot buffer. And at the last meeting, we had the same conversation. We were talking about why you couldn't comply with a minimum. And instead of persuading the board or providing, a persuasive reason why you couldn't, you increased the average buffer. And I don't know that, and Chick, let me know if you disagree, from an environmental point of view, I don't know that increasing the average buffer is as helpful as simply providing a minimum 50-foot buffer.
okay. In my experience as an environmental consultant, the reason we started doing average widths is sometimes it is more, well, first of all, you want people to enjoy them and want them. And sometimes having an average width with a little curve in it gives it more of a natural setting and makes people want to do it. I have spent 30 years doing this, encouraging people to give up lawns and to do buffers. I've worked with Luke on this before. The purpose of an average width is so you don't have a straight line across. And what we thought when we brought up the buffer to the 10-foot contour, which actually if you're in tidal wetlands, 10-foot contour is the limit of jurisdiction for the DEC, for tidal, not freshwater. And we thought this worked very nicely with the grading. It helped us with some of our drainage issues. Again, this was not a vacant lot. This was a lot that was already developed upon. I would understand, Mr. Greenwald, if you'd said, like, hey, it's a vacant lot. I say, okay, you have to meet this. End of story. This is already a previously developed lot. We're trying to improve what's there. We thought, and I'm sorry if I haven't persuaded the board, but with the amount of, Melissa, can you put up the planting? We're doing a very substantial revegetation here. I would say nicer than some of the ones done on Lake Agawam and some of the other ponds in the area. I've also worked on projects where the board has allowed us to do less than 50 feet, actually many of them, or a 50-foot average width, variable width. It's to make it more aesthetically pleasing. Environmentally, and Chick can offer his comments, it is offering the same benefit, especially the fact that we're converting the lawn to native fescue. It's not going to be fertilized. So we're actually improving the overall. When you have an already developed property, you try to improve the existing conditions. And that's what we felt. We thought 50 feet across really, it's not really adding any benefit to the project. I think when you have the net, as it's moving here, as it waves around and everything, it looks more natural. It looks like a more natural shoreline. It's more aesthetically pleasing. It provides just as much environmental benefit with habitat, with food, with shelter for the animals. And on top of covenanting now that 50-foot, like I said, covenanting it, you're going to have an average 75-foot. And that provides a wildlife corridor from the street down to the pond and around the pond. So I think there has to be a balance. That's what I'm trying to balance. If we had a bigger property, heck, I'd give you 50 feet, but I don't. And we're trying to have a little...
The balance that we were trying to facilitate was to say to you, you can go 60 feet from the front yard, okay? I thought in exchange for that additional 20 feet, you could accomplish a minimum 50-foot wetlands buffer, okay?
But it is greater than 50 feet on both. Actually, Melissa, we have pictures on, is there any way to bring it up so you can, the whole lower end, actually, can you bring it up higher, Melissa?
I guess, what's the buffer at the northwest corner of the pond and the southeast?
See, it flares out. Can you bring it up higher? I'm sorry,
Yeah, let me know if you can see it. Yeah.
No, I can't. You have to bring it up higher. There you go. I mean, we're doing all plantings down there, trees there. Let me just step away here. This isn't necessarily buffer, but it's all planted. And we bumped this up and everything, and I mean, we're trying to make something that the client's gonna love to maintain as well. I mean, that's half of our battle too, and Chick knows this too when we have clients. And we really thought, it's a beautiful project. I really thought with the additional planting the shrubs, I mean, I'm sure Chick can tell you how, it's not an inexpensive restoration. And I'd love to have Chick comment, but I think what we're showing here, especially adding in the 50-foot natural area that we're going to covenant, provides a lot more benefit, I believe, than just having a straight 50-foot line around the pond.
Melissa, what's the buffer depth at its narrowest?
Melissa, do you actually we have that thread. Do you have that thread, Melissa? I can't read this.
Yeah, it's 43 feet 11 inches.
And is that at where the fence is to the house to get around so they have a gate? Yeah, I think it's right there.
Yeah, right. So this is 20 feet off of the corner of the building to the edge of the wetland area. And I just add one note to Melissa's review of the buffer area. The one thing that we try to keep in mind when we're working on these variable width buffers is that when we do expand them in areas like this to either side, we're trying to do that in areas where we're limiting runoff from the property. And so when we were working out the grading plan, the majority of our runoff is towards the back of the house and towards the side where you see some of our grading. And so increasing that allows for more area for that water to run through before it gets to the pond. And so there are some benefits in this work and creating these variable widths so that we can try to create larger zones for that runoff to go through.
For absorption.
That was one of the things that we were keeping in mind. Yeah.
Chick, would you like to comment?
Chairman, would you like?
Sure, go ahead, Chick.
Well, yes, both of us, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say there are two sides to this issue, and it's not an easy one, but, you know, I do recall the hearing, I think it was in May, where we did request 50 feet. And that was intended in the design, and I think I even made comments at that hearing about modifying the house design a little bit to accommodate that. So it sounds like we're very close. I would certainly challenge the applicant to, you know, to get to that point. The house is 55 feet. Obviously, you need some area around the house for construction, et cetera. So I think that comment still stands. But I will say, and this is kind of the other side, and Mr. Chairman, we've had some of these discussions, there are other jurisdictions that do consider buffer averaging. One is the State Department of Environmental Conservation under Article 24 of the Environmental Conservation Law. And they put actually weighing standards in the law. And I believe it's under Part 663, where they get into much more detail. And you have to demonstrate it. And they will consider kind of a buffer averaging concept. And also one of the local South Fork jurisdictions, the village of the village of Sag Harbor, actually codified kind of an average buffer concept. We don't have that in Chapter 116. It's pretty explicit that, we look for the 125-foot landscape, 150-foot structure, 200-foot sanitary, and clearly this does not comply. So those are kind of the two sides to it. I've heard the environmental discussion, and, I agree with a lot of that. We are improving the condition, but I have to go back to some of the original challenges that this board gave the applicant, to get a 50-foot buffer. And we have an average 50-foot buffer, but we have a minimum that is less than that. So again, I would challenge the applicant to do better and get closer to what has been requested and what we've talked about. That's really what I can tell you at this time.
Let me ask this question.
It's a tough one.
In other jurisdictions, is 50 feet the minimum buffer that you would recommend, or is it sometimes 75 feet?
The village of Sag Harbor has a 50-foot wetland buffer. It's a very different village. There's many small lots. They're mostly developed. So that's kind of the difference there. The DEC just has a 100-foot jurisdiction area, and anything in that area is subject to permits. If you're in tidal wetlands, they have a minimum setback. But none of their regulations have a minimum buffer, which I find interesting, but they look to get as much as possible. And obviously the town of Southampton is very similar to the village of Southampton with 125 feet. So,
What might the town require with respect to a buffer?
well, I mean, I don't want to try and get in the head of, the chief environmental analyst, Marty Shea. He's very tough, and he looks for the maximum, and, he would look for maximum buffers. I can't tell you the number that he would look for here, or how he might, arrive at a decision on something like this, but again, we're very close. When Melissa
And I'm
on the
listening-
Zoom
I'm
call
listening
said
to
we're
both
at
of you as
40-something feet.
experts. I'm just wondering, the question might be, have we already asked for what any jurisdiction would require as a minimum, which is 50 feet? Some might ask for 75 feet, some might not even accept any buffer. They're just asking you to be a setback. So I'm just wondering where we're falling as far as, our efforts to protect wetlands. It seemed to me, but I'll defer to the experts, it seemed to me that a minimum 50-foot setback, was the minimum, unless the applicant could show that there's no way that they could build a house, and be happy with it, and not, and not infringe upon that, that buffer. And that was our last meeting. I didn't see that. There's a porch there. We were talking about removing the porch. We had already said move the house closer to the road. So that's where I'm coming from,
Sure.
as far as trying
Angle
to
the
balance
porch,
out.
there seem to be options to me. So, and certainly a greater wetland buffer has a greater benefit.
Again, with the porch, and I can bring up the plans if you need it, the porch is only standing on posts. There's nothing under the porch. It's just cantilevered. So that's just, and we show that floor plan, and we can pull it up again if, now, I've been in front of Marty Shea for over 30 years myself, do a lot of work with Marty. I don't want to get in his head, but I will say, I've had similar projects in Southampton town where he would probably give me this. And not give me, but just say, you've really improved everything here. You're putting in IASs, you've maxed out, you started with the septic as far as possible. The house isn't anywhere near as big as it could be allowed by GFA. You shrunk the house when you've asked for the front yard variance. You're actually rectifying something that was not your client's, with the establishing the 50-foot natural area. And yes, I know it's not, they don't have written in stone like 50-foot setback. The only place where the town has that is if you go for administrative wetlands permit. Then you could fast track it, but you have to agree to either a 75-foot wetland setback on a developed lot or 100 feet. So they have setbacks, but that's for an administrative wetland setback, not in front of the board. The reason why you have the board is you have intelligent people who say, you know what, they really have improved what's there. And the reason I'm fighting for this so much is on a small lot like this, it makes a big difference. We went and started staking out, and I don't know if you went out, where the drainage easement is. Then I staked out where 50 feet is. Then I staked out where the buffer is going to be. And we're going to make the lawn into a native fescue lawn, which we have gotten credit from this board for before on Gin Lane, on Meadow Lane. So that's why I think we've worked with you, and I understand why you say 50 feet, but trying to get around the house and get a gate and get a lawnmower through there and everything else, we're just trying to make it work. And I think Melissa Rivas brought up some good points about trying to bump up the buffer where it'll provide the most water absorption and benefit. Again, this is going to be a beautiful project, and I would hope that the board would be able to see, again, covenanting that 50-foot area that was mowed down and everything. And I think it would be actually a great, what's the word I'm looking for, example for other people, like, oh, they will give you a variable width if you're really, I mean, we're going to be covenanted right up to Great Plains, right adjacent a 20-foot drainage easement. That's a big plus. Not many people can offer that and can do that. And then, like I said, I think it's going to be a great area for wildlife corridor and everything else. That's the only reason why we feel a little strong about this. Just a little give that it would look graceful. That's the word I'm looking for, graceful. It's going to function better. I think if you just took 50 foot apart, it's not going to look right. It's not going to go with the grading of the property. It's just going to make no sense whatsoever.
Melissa, what was the percentage that you said would be?
45%.
45. So I think what might be an interesting exercise, we know that your proposal is 45% natural coverage. If you did the math.
That's including the pond.
Including the pond.
Yeah.
If you did the math on what it would be if you hit 50 feet at every point, I don't think that you would see much of a difference in terms of the percentage increase.
I think Melissa, didn't we do that? We figured out what the when we started this, we figured out what the square footage would be of a 50-foot buffer and what it would be with this. Hope did those calculations?
Yeah, there are some calculations on this plan here, but yeah, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head of what it would have been at just the 50-foot buffer.
Yeah, it might be helpful from a comparison standpoint.
If I had.
Not to change what you've done on the flanking sides,
yep.
but just if you extended, if you hit 50 feet at every area, what would your native coverage be? Because it's probably, if you said 43%?
No, 45. It's 44.5.
44.5.
But
it's probably only 47 or 48.
It's actually less, because when we did the square footage of 50 feet around, this is actually more, because we were trying to bump up. So I can get you those numbers, and I thought I had them.
Leave the bumped up areas. Don't, leave that general outline, but just get to the 50 feet at, I think it would just be illustrative of how much you've done. And I don't think, I think it would show that.
50 foot plus the bump up, that's.
Oh, no, let me start over. So
you want me to put a 50-foot radius around the wetlands and then on top of this?
No.
Okay.
I'm I'm on your team on this one.
Okay.
Okay. So
I'm trying to understand what you want.
so you have a buffer line that
Mhm.
in some areas is very deep, and in some areas comes down to 43%. Right.
43 feet.
43 feet. If you kept the buffer line where you have it drawn now, in all the locations where it is 50 feet or more,
Mm-hmm.
and then also where you hit the areas where it, came down to 43 feet, but made it 50. So we're talking about
You
like,
just want a line so you can see how little we're talking about here in comparison.
Yes.
I got you. We
Like-
can do that.
okay.
We can do that.
Mhm.
Because it's really just, in fact, Melissa, can you call out what those threads are? Because the board specifically had asked us to add these threads, and we did.
Mm-hmm. Sure. This is 45 feet. This is 45 foot 7 inches. This is 50 feet 8 inches. This is 43 foot 11 inches. And then the one in the middle here is 54 foot 1 inch. And then here we just did a couple of quick threads to show what the entire buffer is now that we have the 50-foot landscaped area. So this is 169 feet 2 inches. This is 185 feet and 2 inches.
Can you bring it down now so we can see it? Sorry. The-
Yes, that's
The windows
okay.
keep changing.
Oh, well.
We can provide that, though. But,
Well, let's see if any other board members have questions. Susan, Julia, do you have any
Neighbors
questions?
or
We're gonna
anything?
leave it open for all purposes anyway, so.
Not now. Some of my concerns were, when you look at the house plan and the parking, that moving the house toward the street, I believe, requires that there be a sense of the streetscape. And there's a lot of parking and cars. It's huge. And then a garage, I don't know. I think it is not fair to the rest of the community to have, one thing would be to move it up and be a good neighbor, but I don't actually feel this looks like a good neighborly plot. Now oh no.
Well, the village has parking requirements, right? That you're probably trying to meet, parking spot requirements.
and also, there are a number of roads on Great Plains that have parking courts in the front yard.
Yes, but yours, fine. I think yes, there are parking requirements for everyone. That doesn't mean that in this situation, that it should be so upfront. It's either at the neighbor or in the front yard here, pretty far close to the street. And maybe some people have parking, you don't have a whole lot. It doesn't impinge on anything that has to do with the giving. It seems to me the burden is on the street, which it shouldn't be, given everything
Can you show
else.
the site plan?
Melissa, can you put up the radius map so we can see where the nearby properties are and the houses?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in where the other houses are. I'm interested in this.
I understand, but it gives you a sense of what,
And also, Melissa, you keep touting the buffer on the eastern side. That's the thing that's the violation. That has to be repaired, right?
it has to be replanted as a natural
Okay,
area.
so fine.
Right.
That's-
No, and we're actually would like to add it as part of a covenanted buffer, which is
It is a
more,
co- it
no, but
is a
that's,
It is a covenanted buffer. It's just not there.
no, it
Right.
was never covenanted. That's why
Yes,
it didn't show up on the
Oh.
deed when the property owner purchased the property, because it was never covenanted.
I don't care. All I know is it's on the map. I'm not going to argue with you, okay?
So Melissa, can you bring up the radius map?
This is the radius map. Can you see it?
No. It's not on.
Can you
You
see
need
my
to share
screen?
again. You need to share again, Melissa.
All right,
You
hold
can
on.
see it on this end, Charles.
Can you share it again, Melissa? Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yep. Right.
Can you zoom in?
Mm-hmm. Think.
Actually, just remember something too. Luke had asked last time if we actually did have one of the neighbors across the street. Their attorney reached out to us, and we're asking questions. And I said, "Here, I'll give you my Dropbox." He called back. He said, "It looks great." They were very impressed with the house. The fact the house height was not maxed out, and the vegetation, the landscape plan that Ed Hollander's office was doing to screen the house from Great Plains Road. The reason I'm bringing this here is just to show you that you have well, actually, if you could zoom out a little bit, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're one of the only undersized lots in the whole neighborhood. Although this house is one of the ones that was developed, the existing house was one of the first built. The houses across the street were not built until within the last 20 years. And then the one that's over here, this is historic. But we're fronting on a flagpole lot, and like I said, we have existing very mature vegetation that's between us and Great Plains Road. We can actually, Melissa, can you put up the elevations of Ed's architectural plans?
Oh, yeah. You'll have to give me a second here
Okay.
to pull that up.
If you recall, this isn't a the current property, the house is straight up and down the whole front facade. And and the way Mr. Siegel has designed it, oh, now we've got yellow. You want to, yeah, that's the front aspect of the house. And then if you show it the side, show how narrow it is, please. And that's how wide the house is. And you can see how it steps back from the front. Do you want to discuss that?
The house has been purposely zigzagged in plan so that the part where the cylinder is and to the left is what you'll see predominantly from the street in front of the motor court. The part to the right of the cylinder is pushed back and defines a motor court in back. And you'll hardly see that at all from the street because the landscaping will be blocking all of it. So in fact, the actual elevation that is street frontage is from the cylinder to the left. And
I'm not talking about the house, I'm talking about the
motor court. Do you have a
the
landscape
motor
plan?
court, the drive, the thick drive. Listen, if you get nope. I would say, yeah.
Melissa,
Check out how much.
The last page, it shows the blow up in each of the areas.
So there's, first of all, the other houses that you showed, which is really none of my business, are not as close. This is super close to the street, your parking court. It really is. And I realize that you're trying to put a lot of things on this lot, including the house, but there's a garage, then there's this drive to the garage, and at a certain point, I don't have a good feeling about the neighborliness of this. Because the fact that you're allowed to move the house up does not mean that then you're allowed to jam a lot of stuff up in front of it that's not like the rest of the community. You know, something's got to give, I feel. And I don't know what to tell you. There's hardly any, I don't know what you should do, but I don't feel good about it. I don't think it looks appropriate for the street, really, I don't. That you've come, nowhere else would you encounter the cars literally up by the street, even hedges, I don't care what kind of stuff you want to plant. It just doesn't, it's too much. There's a lot of, compared to the rest of what's there that can be seen from the street, it's to me not a good look and not really friendly to the neighborhood. I realize that this is an unusual property, but it is. That's the state of affairs. That doesn't mean the rest of the neighborhood should suffer. And I feel that might, in my head, that is not a good plan. And I have no,
Just to put it in a different way, but I'm agreeing with Susan. It's an accommodation to say, let's go 60 feet from the street, okay? The setback is 80 feet, okay? So in exchange for that accommodation, which to our minds, to the board's mind, okay, is a major accommodation to say, okay, go 20 feet closer, then to, I guess, present a motor court between the house and the street does not seem appreciative of the 60-foot setback. That there should be a way that you soften the impact that moving the house closer to the street has. And this feels like a little bit of the opposite of softening the impact. Is that a nice way to put it, Susan?
well put, Mark.
Thank you.
Doesn't village code though allow you to have parking in the corner front yard as long as you provide adequate screening?
No, 100%. Yeah, it's just village code doesn't allow you to put the house 60 feet back. So there's some resistance on the board to saying, okay, we won't allow 60 feet. Move your house, comply with the 80-foot setback, or soften the impact that it has on the street. And what you presented is just not it's not a softening. It's kind of, increasing the impact of moving the house closer to the road. That, you can, consider that any way you want. We're going to leave the application open for all purposes anyway, but that was the response from many board members, that, hey, moving it 60 feet closer to the street, that's a major accommodation. Let's see how that works. And then when you show the motor court there, it's like, well, we're not so sure it works then.
Melissa, hasn't the motor?
And at that time, Mark, frankly, when we made those statements that we could imagine the house being built closer to the road, we didn't actually have a clear understanding of what was happening or not happening in the buffer. And in terms of the space, in terms of the compliance, all of that. Apparently, none of us did. But I think for myself, leaving this meeting tonight, sorting out what just would bring the property into compliance, and then adding on what else is being requested, because the two are now, they're completely linked together, because the suggestion that was made was in part so that the buffer would have a better opportunity. We had no idea that we were making that accommodation as something to consider. It certainly was not a settled issue when we knew that the property was out of compliance then for many years. I think that's also a piece of this tonight, is there's a lot on the table here that's being requested, half of which is just bringing the property into compliance. And I think sorting through some of that, for myself anyway, is going to be important. And after I've done that, will I really be able to know what my questions are about the property as a whole? That's my 2 cents on this.
Do we want to see, do any neighbors or anybody from the public wish to be heard?
Yes, I have a Christopher Lawrence hand up.
We can't hear you.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay. Can you take down the picture so at least you can see me and I can see myself talking? Okay. Thank you. By way of introduction, I'm Christopher Lawrence. My wife and I have the house directly to the west, not the flag lot, but 400 Great Plains. I'm going to try and make the comments brief. First of all, I'd like to thank the ZBA, and I'd also would like to thank the applicant and the consultants for laying all of the material out so a thoughtful dialogue could occur. And again, it has been thoughtful. I don't really want to repeat the past points I've made. I've sent a number of notes or emails to the ZBA where I've had a concern that we shouldn't have two sets of rules. We shouldn't have one set of rules for Greenfield, and we shouldn't have another set of rules for the renovations. I still believe that either the wetland rules are good or they're not good. I also want to make the point that I am not that focused on the fact that the applicant did not know that parts of it were in violation. In some respects, the burden of that should not then fall on the neighbors. I don't know that it's whether it's a useful inquiry to say that should have been known or not known. But the fact of the matter is those violations were there. But I also want to take issue with the statement that only applies to one piece, which had to do with some of the remediation. I want to take issue with the fact that, in fact, that the statement was made by one of the advisors that this plan actually fixes all the violations. It does not. Part of the challenge, and it's been noted, is that this is an unusual lot. It's a small lot, and that, in fact, you can't, by doing the things that want to be done here, you wouldn't be asking for points A through H if you actually were remediating the existing issues. You may be fixing part of the buffer, but you then are by packing all this in, you've asked for other things, because the reality is it should have been, even if you didn't know the piece that you claim you didn't, and even if you could convince everybody that that's the neighborhood's problem, you still knew or should have known what the wetland issues were. The house, the point is the property is not unbuildable, which somebody made the comment in the last hearing. It does have clear issues about its improvability. You could, in fact, remediate a great deal of the environmental issues around, but once you start putting in the new house, the pergolas, etc., then that leads you to ask for the A through H. Now, look, my primary issue has been around the wetlands. I think there's been a very thoughtful discussion about some of the neighborhood issues, but my objections, and look, I may be one view, and I have said before, and I will say it again, I have infinite respect for the ZBA, for the job that all of you do, and will respect ultimately wherever you come out. But I want the other side of this discussion heard, which is I don't think that philosophically we should take the point that, gee, non-conforming lot, I now want to go in, put a bigger house, pergolas, etc., motor court, and therefore I want all of these other things. That to me is a very different issue than fixing an existing violation. And again, the statement that, oh, you're fixing the violations, not really quite right, because you're then introducing new ones. So I thank everybody for their time and consideration, and I fully understand that I may not be the majority view on this subject. But again, I want to compliment the village. It restores my faith in some parts of our democratic process to see this carried out in a thoughtful way. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should see if there's anybody else from the public who wishes to be heard. I'm not sure if there is or not. And do we have
I
anybody else
have
from the public?
nobody online, Chair.
And nobody in the audience?
I'll be
Okay,
very
sure,
quick.
go ahead.
I just want to remind this board that when we first came to you, the reason we went for the variances, we met with Chris Talbot about this project, who, by the way, wrote the C of O, and he had advised, he's like, listen, instead of trying to renovate Janelle's house, you should try to move the house into an X zone, build it to meet hurricanes, a new building code, create a septic system that's an IA system, make improvements. So I don't want to say we're just rectifying. When this was last approved for a wetlands permit, it was, there was established a 20-foot buffer from the wetlands, which has been maintained, and this 50-foot naturally, like what Chick and I both read through the records, and we don't understand what it was for, but it was supposed to be left alone. It wasn't a buffer, it wasn't, so I think the only thing we're quote-unquote rectifying is we're actively replanting something that shouldn't have been cut down. With regard to everything else, it's an improvement. We're increasing the setback, we're increasing the wetlands buffer, we're updating the septic system. The house is still a modest-sized house. The house is, we originally came in with 80, like I said, 80-foot setback. It's the exact same house, except shifted further towards the street. We can look at the parking court, but again, we do have required parking that we have to do, but we can take another look at that. I will work, Luke, on that 50-foot radius that you asked for to show what the difference is. And I appreciate Mr. Lawrence saying that we've, worked hard and everything, but I think we, from day one when my clients purchased this, we met with the village billing department. What do we need to do? What do you advise? Ed and I met with it. He goes, go for a new house. I said, well, it's a really constrained lot. He goes, no, I think the board will be reasonable. And I think we've all been reasonable. We've been working to this point and everything, but I think the house is a modest house. I think we can do improvements if you want additional screening, if that helps. We did find there are 2 other properties, unfortunately they're a little older, that have, there's 180 Great Plains. It's got a 9-foot setback. It's a 2-story house, 9-foot setback from Great Plains Road. And there's another one at 300 Great Plains Road that has front yard relief to 75 feet. And then the garage, when they added the garage as part of the house, or the garage was separate, they put a joint, they combined them. It's now 37 feet from Halsey Neck Lane. So there are other examples, and I can submit those to the board if that helps too. But I do think that where we're at right now with the size of the house and everything's correct, we can look at the motor court and we can revisit the buffer. I still do feel strongly about variable width, and we will show that difference. But I do just want to correct that. I don't think it's quote unquote rectifying. The only thing that was the violation was somebody in the past cut down something they weren't supposed to cut down. It wasn't covenanted, it wasn't, it apparently was in no maintenance. We're not only going to let it passively, we're not passive, we're going to actively restore it and covenant it. So in perpetuity, it'll be part of the deed. And again, which makes it, I know you don't like hearing variable, but 75 feet and a native corridor for wildlife, which I don't think many properties have that ability to give to you or work on and present, and that's what we'd like to do. So I just wanted to end on that, and I guess we'll see you at the next meeting.
Melissa, can I ask you just one more
Sure.
question? Refresh my memory. When the house moved north into the front yard setback line, did the wetlands buffer at its thinnest point there also grow
Yes.
with it?
Yes, it did.
So
I made a point of that. We pulled it up to the 10-foot contour, actually. Melissa, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We're now to 10 foot, which gave us another 4 or 5 feet of buffer in that area.
Again, like she said, we're trying to work with the grading and drainage plan too, and where we don't want that water shooting off into the pond. So we're trying to, and that's why we also added more shrubbery.
Understood.
Okay, so I'll motion to close case number 3132, to adjourn case number 3132 for all purposes, 370 Great Plains Lane. Can I have a second?
Second that?
And all in favor of adjourning for all purposes, case number 3132, 370 Great Plains Lane? Aye.
Good. Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to case number 3142, 161 Corrigan Street. Is the applicant here? Or is the applicant appearing via Zoom?
I have nobody's hand up here.
Antoinette, did you say there's nobody's hand?
Yeah, nobody's hand, I'm sorry.
Okay, so
Nobody's
why
hand up.
why don't we hold off on case number 3142? We'll make a second call, 161 Corrigan, and move to case number 3144, Stephen Hickey, 1377 Meadow Lane.
I have a Kevin Wells hand up, Chair.
We'll come back.
Okay.
We'll come back right after this.
Which will hopefully be brief. How are you doing?
All's good.
So Rob Herman, Event Consultants, 1319 North Sea Road, Southampton, on behalf of the applicant Stephen Hickey. This is a continuation of an adjourned public hearing regarding the removal of a small dock platform and the construction of a new quote-unquote kayak dock in its place. At the last hearing, we were asked to address a couple of comments from the board and from Chick, which had included the indication that the terminal stair at the end of the catwalk would be a removable aluminum stair rather than a fixed wood steps, and also to indicate that any damaged or lost tidal marsh grass that occurred either during removal of the existing dock or construction of the new dock would be replaced, restored in kind and in place. So we submitted last Thursday a revised plan prepared by N Consultants, last dated October 5th, 2022, indicating the removable aluminum stair and indicating those notes concerning the marsh grass replacement. And I believe Chick had also asked that we submit a simple narrative construction methodology, which we did. It's in the record. I don't think the board needs me to read the whole thing to the record here, but basically it did address the concern about the careful removal of the existing platform, the construction of the new dock, including the replacement of the plantings, and some just general information concerning approximate, work hours, time of construction, materials, etc., confirming the same information that is also in the site plan with respect to the fact that the dock would be constructed entirely of untreated materials. We hope that the submission of those two pieces of information sufficiently responded to the board's requests and to Chick's request. But I'm certainly here to answer any further questions about either of those if the board has any.
Do any board members have any questions? Luke, do you have anything?
No.
Susan?
No.
Joyce?
No.
Chick, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. Yeah, I think as far as the last discussion, Rob has summarized the key items that we did discuss and has made a resubmission. Since that time, I was checking files, and we do have a wetland permit that was issued in 2009, October 22nd, 2009, and it did reference plans for a wetland buffer and landscape plantings for the Hickey residents that were submitted by the applicant and referenced in the permit. So conditions 1 and 2 of that permit identify those plans. And just looking at the site, I'm not sure that they comply with the original intent of those plans at this time. So I would just ask Rob to, get those plans, make sure it is consistent, and I think that's something that would be, appropriate to look at this time, given the fact that a permit was issued in 2009. But as far as the specifics of this dock, I have no further questions.
But would you recommend that we hold off until you can compare the
Yeah,
existing
unless
conditions?
Rob
with
has information at this time. I don't think he was the representative, but certainly the Hickeys were the applicants at that time.
So I would have, I guess, two questions. One for Chick, was there something, I mean, I have, from all of my recent visits to the site, and I'm going to say this without the benefit of the plan that you're referencing from that 2009 permit, the site is very heavily vegetated, both on the water side of the house and to both sides of the house. Was there something specific about the plan that you felt was not in compliance so that I could look into that?
I don't really have the ability to share this right now, but if you look at an aerial photograph, there's kind of a round
Oh,
feature
yes,
to the
yeah.
north of the house, and I don't recall if that was reflected on the plans. I need to check the plans myself, but there are specific plans referenced in the 2009.
And the mowed lawn on the street side.
Lawn on the street side. That was
That's
not,
probably associated with the sanitary system. But again, everything should be in accordance with the
Right,
plans.
it's called, on the approved plan, it's called AB, American Beach Grass.
okay, so we would have to look at those two specific items. The other question would be then, if there is a compliance question related to that 2009 zoning board decision and plantings plan, would that be something that necessarily has to become part and parcel with this application, or would that really be more of a separate compliance issue in connection with that prior decision?
That may be a Jeff question.
In other words, the question that I'm asking is, if the board was otherwise moved to close and approve the dock that's being proposed currently, whether as a condition of that permit, for example, could require compliance with the prior decision, or could it just be handled as a completely separate matter? In other words, a compliance matter that is handled completely unrelated to this permit, because the two things don't have anything to do with one another.
I'm kind of loath to say that it can be handled separately, because there can be circumstances in which there's something in the file that, while it pertains to the same property, arguably pertains to a different, oh, do I need to be close to this? Yeah. Pertains to a different application or a different grant, but it can end up being missed in the, sort of lost in the sauce of the overall. So I would just be more comfortable if something, if the board were to proceed, that it should be subject to compliance with the prior as well. I just think it keeps the record cleaner. It keeps the matters tied together. Whether or not they're substantively one and the
Right.
same,
No, I
it's the
follow you.
same subject property. And I think that way the record, if there's ever another application, when they go to look at it, the board will see 1, 2, 3.
Sure, because otherwise, that issue could get lost in the shuffle with this.
I agree.
So I'm going to repeat the other question I asked. Would it be possible for either as whether it would be a condition of getting a certificate of compliance for this project or whatever, but could it be a special condition of this approval that any inconsistency with the previously approved plantings plan be corrected in order to get a certificate of compliance for this project? Or, would the release of the permit be something to that extent, as opposed to coming back for another hearing to discuss something that has to be resolved anyway independently of the proposed dock?
But that's, if I'm understanding you correctly, and leap in if I'm not, those issues of whether or not there's compliance with the prior aren't before this board, right? So if you're seeking to bring those into compliance, you would have to follow up with code enforcement.
Right.
And with Chick Voorhees. So I think what you're asking is, could it be a conditional grant here subject to legalizing and bringing
Correct.
into compliance anything prior?
Correct.
In some ways, it's a bit of a chicken or the egg thing, that should there be full compliance before a grant, or grant on
Contingent
compliance
on.
being made?
That's my question.
I have to tell you, the safest course is usually to have compliance then it makes it a clearer path for this board to say now that everything has been complied with, they can move forward.
Okay.
And one of the reasons for that, and if I could just speak out a bit, is that there's recent local law within the village, and I'm not saying this is exactly the same circumstance, but where there's an existing violation, a board cannot process an application.
Got it.
So if there's something open, I think the safest course, and I would be suggesting to the board, is that be closed prior to this being closed.
So that's going to lead me to the last question. I don't think the board could see it, but what Chick was showing on the laptop and what I can describe, basically, I know we're more technologically advanced than this at this point, but for the sake of doing it the old-fashioned way. What Chick is showing is just on the north side of the
Can you
house.
put that down on the table, please?
I can. Will that, oh, this table, yes, which is the old-fashioned way, sorry.
You have the plans, Chief?
I don't think we need the plan.
I have an aerial photo.
Yeah, if you were able to show the aerial photo,
I can let you in.
Sure.
that would be better than what I'm trying to do.
It really won't take much to get it
No,
to match the plan.
And I mean, if the front is, okay, so, Chick, just show,
That's the property, yeah,
right there.
that is the sitting area. This is the area that was supposed to be beach grass.
Right, so if that's supposed to be beach grass and it's turf grass, that's a quick and easy thing to
Right.
resolve.
And now's the season to do it, I'll point out.
Where
Yeah, you
that-
could get that done this week and,
Where
know.
that circular, what that is it's sand. It's like, and those 4 rectangles you see are just chairs that
Right.
get moved in during the winter. So there's an area that's all well landward of where the tidal wetland boundary is. It's closer to the house. It's basically just a sandy seating area. So the question would be, I mean, would the board have any objection to effectively, I mean, it's not a structure, but at least with respect to wetlands, do you think that the board would be open to the possibility of legalizing that sand seating area? Because if so, then we could just have it added to the plan. I just don't want to go through all that and then have the board say, oh, well, no, we wouldn't even consider this, because then that would be a waste of time. But that's really all it is. It's an area that is literally surrounded by very, very dense vegetation, where it's just a place to sit. And it's completely permeable, obviously, because it's sand. It's nothing, there's no structure there.
yeah.
So that would be my question. I don't know if the board's in a position to answer, but if you were okay with that, then the way we would go about wanting to legalize it would be to just ask to include it as part of this permit.
I think if it were put on the application, we would probably ask for Chick's opinion.
And so, Chick, are you in a position to
Right.
offer an opinion about that now?
But I think we're ahead of ourselves a little bit, because one of the things Chick was saying was he really has not been able to, provide a complete comparison of the approved landscape plan and what's there. So I think either way, we need to wait to see what we're talking about. I mean, when pressed, yes, Chick said, obviously that jumps out at me.
Right.
That's different.
Right.
But that's not to say that there aren't other differences between the approved plan. So I just think it's 2 weeks away. We just need to wait and see what exactly is the compare and contrast with the existing plan, and then we can talk about bringing it into compliance. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, I mean, I would want to study it more, study the basis for the plan, the way it was designed. And having a barren area, to me, is not as good as having a vegetated area. So, obviously, the house there is close to the wetlands, closer than provided for in Chapter 116. But there were extenuating circumstances that were discussed at that time, and we should revisit those. So I think you're right, Mr. Chairman. Take a little time, study it, and I think it's, you know, I understand what Rob is trying to do is link these and get it all satisfied, but that seems like a big ask.
I was
when you
actually
don't
trying to
have
keep them
compliance.
separate.
Well, no, you wanted to
But since
amend your-
council wants to join them, I'm trying to
No,
figure
no,
out
no,
what to do
no,
with
no.
them.
Just to be clear, council's not saying that they should be joined in one application.
Mm.
What council is saying is that if there are open concerns or
Then you
issues or
can't.
violations that
Okay.
need to be addressed, that it shouldn't be, the board would consider this and then say, subject to anything else that's illegal has to be legalized. That then, you know,
Sure.
I think that leaves things
Just-
pretty foggy. What I'm saying is everything needs to be addressed and then the board could go to decision. I'm just
Tot-
advising, the board will make its call, but
For the time being, let's
Yeah.
just await
Let's
Chick's
study it.
complete
Yeah.
study.
Understood. I think I was just looking for clarity because the simplest thing to do would be, my guess, just knowing how heavily vegetated that site is, that Chick will come back identifying the same two things that were identified today. So just from the client's perspective, we weren't looking to pick a fight about this area, just kind of looking to know, do we just say, yes, we're going to get it replanted? I just didn't want to do that and then have the board say, oh, well, if you wanted, you could have just, you know, asked us to legalize it, in which case that would have been the nicer thing.
It makes sense what
But
you're
it-
asking.
But if it's not going to go that way, then it would just be probably more efficient to just resolve it. So I guess at this point, Chick, will you be able to get back to me between now and the next meeting, or would we need longer than that?
With the board's permission, I'm happy to speak with the applicant.
Sure.
and share some of
No,
those
we
findings.
just need whatever your study might be by the, what is it, the Tuesday before the Thursday
Exactly
meeting.
right. So for the record, the meeting is the 27th, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, the 27th.
Is that a Thursday again?
That's a Thursday.
Okay. And when you say the Tuesday before, you don't mean 2 days before, you mean the Tuesday the prior week, or literally
No,
2 days
just
before?
2 days before.
Okay,
Just
2 days
to-
before.
By noon,
By noon on the 25th.
yes. Anything that is submitted after that, we won't consider.
Okay.
And I'll just indicate that, you know, now is a good planting season.
Yeah,
so
well, that's why I'm
again,
asking,
depending
not to
on-
rush you, but if there's something we
Well,
need to do, we could do it
You
now.
may be the one that wants to rush. I'm not going to feel rushed. That's up to you.
No, my point is that if the concern is about vegetation that needs to be established, now would be the time to establish it. So the more quickly we get to that, the better. Thank you.
Okay, we're on it. Did anybody else from the public want to be heard? Antoinette, is there anybody?
Nobody on. We just have this Kevin Wells that he came in, but
It's
Kevin
okay,
Wells, are you
we're
with
gonna go
us
to
for this
Kevin's
application?
161
Cargan.
Cargan right now. So you can keep Kevin in. So I'll motion to adjourn for all purposes. Case number 3144, Stephen Hickey, 1377 Meadow Lane. Can I have a second?
I second that.
And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we'll see in 2 weeks. And then we can go to case number 3142, 161 Corrigan LLC. I believe, Kevin, you're presenting?
Hey, good evening. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay, good. I apologize. My mouse was unresponsive. I was trying to raise my hand and I got skipped before, so I apologize for that.
All good.
So this is for 161 Corrigan Street. The application is to decrease the setback for a side yard pool or accessory structure from 20 feet to 17 feet, increasing the pool size as of right 18 by 30 to 18 by 33 feet. And I know that last time we had a little bit, I know that Julia had some concerns. I kept bringing up 181 Corrigan, which was, I believe, a very similar situation to this one. And I had a survey overview done and I submitted it to you guys so you could see exactly how similar this situation is and how identical the properties are. Did you guys get that?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And then we also, to Luke's point, he said that it may be more favorable from your standpoint if we went to a 47-foot setback from the front yard instead of a 50-foot setback. So we gave an option B, which would give us the same size pool. But again, the pool would be moved to the south property line instead of the north property line. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that, you know, I believe that this hardship is caused by what in reality is the side yard of this property getting zoned as a front yard because of the corner lot. And that's really the hindrance here. And I also don't think that I articulated correctly about the reason why we needed this pool. And it's not just greed and that, oh, we want, you know, as big a pool as possible. It's about wanting a safer and a more functional pool. So basically, pool codes are your projection from your deep end to your shallow end is 3 to 1. So for every 3 feet, you have to raise 1 foot. You can't have the deep end go to the shallow end like this, because if someone dives, then they could dive into the wall. So it's a very gradual 3 to 1 ratio that gives you the rise from the deep end to the shallow end. So the smaller that we make this pool, it makes the shallow end non-existent in the pool, because we have to, as you can see in the survey, we have to put the stairs there. So by moving the pool, by building the pool at 30 feet deep, 30 feet long instead of 33 feet long, it effectively eliminates the shallow end of the pool. So that's really the main reason. I think I said in the first meeting, it's just to get a nicer pool, but to articulate it a little more correctly, it's just to get a safer pool with a proper deep end and a proper shallow end. So that's really the reason for this. It's not, you know, getting a larger pool for the sake of having a larger pool. So, and then the other point that I kind of wanted to bring up as well is that, you know, again, if we do build it to that 17-foot setback, we have that the principal building is there. So we have something that's 30 feet tall projecting out of the ground, and we're asking for the pool, which is on grade, to be on that same parallel. So again, I don't think that it's something that's going to be necessarily impactful in any negative way to any of the neighbors or the feel of the neighborhood. So those were just a couple of points that I wanted to make.
Do any board members want to speak to this? Joyce, do you have anything you want to?
I don't think so at this point.
Susan or Julia, do you want to speak to this application?
I'll let Susan go first.
Okay. I don't actually think, the way that you have the stairs on the pool is your choice. You wouldn't need to have it that way. I don't think your arguments about safety, I'm not going there with that. And I just think that I don't feel good about setting a precedent. I believe that would then allow everyone in your neighborhood to do this. I'm sorry. But I don't think that what you get out of it is that much, except you get a bigger pool. I get that part. But I think 30 feet is an ample pool. Where you put it, you put all this stuff on the lot, you have made choices, lining it up with the house, all these arguments don't deal with the actual zoning, which we're here to protect the community and to enforce the zoning if possible. And you had a blank slate and made choices, and those choices then somehow required you to come before us. So I hear what you're saying, but I'm not in favor of it.
Julia, did you want to add anything?
I don't think I have anything substantive to add at this point.
Well, I'd like to, is there more to say? Can we close this?
We should see if anybody from the public wishes to be heard, and then
Absolutely.
we can close it. Antoinette, is there anybody here that wants to speak to this? Or Antoinette, is there anybody in the public via Zoom who wants to speak to this?
There was, actually, Brian Glasser had his hand up and he came in. Brian, are you here to speak on this application?
Hello, board members. I was just here for support if anyone had any technical questions about the applicant's request.
And there is nobody else.
Okay, so then I will motion to close for all purposes case number 3142-161 Corrigan LLC. Can I have a second?
Second that.
And all in favor
Aye.
of closing for all purposes case number 3142-161 Corrigan? Julia, how are you voting?
I'm voting to close.
Okay, and Joyce?
I vote to close.
Vote to close.
So we'll move on to our new cases. The first one is case number 3147, 64 Down East Lane. Andrew Fleiss is the applicant here, or the applicant's representative.
Okay.
Internet, are they here via Zoom?
Yes, I have InterScience here.
Hello, it's Jim Walker again for Andrew Fleiss, 64 Down East Lane. It seems to me your public hearings have dragged on pretty long tonight, so I'm going to try to go through this quickly. Chick Voorhees asked us to put the dock proposal on the survey, which we did. Chick also asked for project description, which we provided, and also asked for construction protocol, which we provided. The Zoning Board of Appeals should be aware that the Board of Trustees has approved this dock. The regulatory agencies involved is DEC, Army Corps of Engineers, Department of State, Board of Trustees, the village, ZBA, and the building department. Generally, we submit all the applications concurrently, but the Board of Trustees are the single regulatory agency most interested in protecting the water, and we have finished with the Board of Trustees. Your consultant, Alex Wallach, AICP, noticed this project for a variance, and the only reason why I want to bring that up, and we'll go through it real quickly, is I represented 405 Captain's Neck Lane. Guy's name is Sims Lansing. I obtained a wetland special permit and a building permit, and subsequently to that, a CFO. There was no variance required. The dock at 405 is 10 feet off the property line, and the kayak rack is located 6 feet off the property line, and those are 2019 permits, which you have in the village records. The board should be aware this is a kayak dock. It is in very shallow water. The property owner has a family who wants to use this for kayaks, canoes, dinghy uses such as a stand-up paddleboard. The project is designed exactly the same as 405 Captain's Neck Lane. The board should be aware that the town requires a top handrail made out of tropical hardwood. Below that, your building inspector will require vinyl clad stainless steel wire to be installed to meet the state building department, the building code. So we will do exactly what Tin Ho So has told us to do, same thing that we did over at 405 Captain's Neck Lane when Chris Talbot was there. We still have to get the DEC and the Army Corps permits, but having the Board of Trustees permits will make this project move along fairly well. I do want to let the board know that the adjoining property owner to the west is Jocko Rittenbow. He's our client, and he's written a letter of support for this project dated September 29th, which was submitted to the village. Affidavits posted mailing were sent in today. And I don't think I want to belabor the point any more than that. This is a small residential dock. Again, it's designed to be a kayak dock, and it provides access to the arm of Hetty Creek that fronts 405 and 64 down East Lane. And it meets all the town requirements, and I believe it meets all the state and Army Corps regulations, and we would like to close the public hearing. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board or Mr. Voorhees may have.
Well, how far is the proposed dock going to be from the dock directly south?
The town trustees requirement is a dock can occupy 1/3 of a creek, which is exactly what is provided in 405 Captain's Neck Lane. However, at 64 Down East Lane, we are not going into the creek. We're going to the edge of the water and stopping. So the dock at 405, as I recall, is 8 feet into the water, and the dock at 64 Down East Lane does not go into the water. So there's 16 feet additional to the 405 Captain's Neck Lane from the proposed dock at Andrew Fleiss's property.
I kind of feel like we need to see both on a plan to really get a sense of that. And
they're both on the plans.
Oh, they are? Can you pull the
Yes,
plan
they
up?
are.
Can I share this?
We can share. By the way, for the board's information, I had no idea that we could appear live. So otherwise, I would be down at
We'd
Village
love to
Hall.
see you next time.
So, what's that?
We'd love to see you next time.
So that's awkward on my part. But those plans show precisely on sheet 205 the proposed dock and the dock that I got approved for 405 Captain's Neck Lane. It shows now or formerly Fred Havemeyer, who is the prior owner of the property, who is also my client.
Yeah, I see it. I see it.
And you can easily see how far each dock projects into the water. The whole creek is open. Neither dock goes past mean low water. So the creek isn't impacted by either dock, in my opinion. Both of those docks are kayak docks. Both were designed by me, and they provide access for kayak, paddleboard, canoe, stuff like that.
See, in the aerial, I see in this map you have the brown line is the edge of marsh. But in the aerial photography, it looks as though the dock to the south does extend further into the water. Maybe the water has receded. Maybe that was just when this photo was taken. It appears to me that the docks are going to be very, very close together. And then the second question is, when you say that the proposed dock isn't going to come into the creek, does that mean that the family is going to be, getting on and off the dock and trampling around in the wetlands?
No, but the way that you're thinking is appropriate. Go to the air photo. We look at the dock on 405 Captain's Neck Lane. The drop platform, which is a 4-foot by 6-foot platform, sticks into the water. At the Andrew Fleiss property on 64 Down East Lane, the drop platform will go right at the edge of the marsh, and there will be a ladder down to the water. And no, they won't be trampling on the marsh or have a reason to. Basically, you drop a kayak into the water and step down the ladder into the kayak, and you're lodged. And the docks aren't going closer together. There's 24-foot width, of which 405 Captain's Neck Lane occupies 8 feet of width into that creek. but the dock at 64 Down East Lane will stop at the edge of the marsh, and the property owner can use, his family can use the kayak dock to launch a kayak and paddle out into Hetty Creek. This is a very low intensity use of the waterfront. It allows Andrew Fleiss's family to do the normal things kids want to do, take a canoe or a kayak out into Hetty Creek.
Chick, do you agree with that, being low impact with relative to how the water may flow in and out of the creek and the potential to block any wildlife or, you know, a dam building there?
I do have a number of comments, if
Go ahead. Yeah.
you'd like me to go through that.
Is that okay, Jim? Are you done so that we can hear from Chick?
I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that any discussions that I had with Jim prior to this hearing were really housekeeping matters. There were a few things about putting something on a survey and things that I thought would clarify the record. We didn't talk about the substance of the application because that's the purpose of the meetings here. I do have some design questions. It sounds like, you know, Jim has been proceeding through other permitting agencies. And, you know, that's great because it's always good to hear from the other agencies. But, you know, one of the things that I look for, and we did look at this on 405 Captain's Neck, and I can actually show you the permit plans for 405 Captain's Neck at the end of this. But the application, the way it's depicted, let me just see if I can do a new share. No, I think I have it. There it is. You can see that the wetland line is this line in blue. That's a good line. That's part of the permit requirements for the submission. Most of the areas landward of the wetlands are lawn or some type of landscape. Part of my concern is that, you know, I usually try and get docks aligned as perpendicular as possible so they don't traverse as much wetlands as it would if it were at an angle. Also, the kayak rack, which is this rectangular feature here, is right, you know, it actually goes maybe a foot or so into the wetlands and is within the wetland buffer. And there really isn't a wetland buffer on this property. As I said, it's pretty much cleared or disturbed down to the wetlands. We also have the mean high water is here, spring high water is here, edge of marsh is this brownish line, and basically the platform is within the edge of marsh. And if you look at the cross section, which I should be able to go to, but I have to reorient the view. Let me see if I can get there. So this is showing spring high water, mean high water, and the edge of marsh is roughly in this area, about where the platform is. I mean, I just have concerns about the impact of this structure on wetlands. It is a open grate decking, which is good. It is elevated where it can be, as you can see in the cross section, to allow vegetation to grow underneath. But I think that the orientation could be improved on this, and I would ask Jim to look at that. Also, in looking at the aerial photograph, which I'll go back to for a minute, and we don't have the luxury of Suffolk County GIS still, so I'm using a Google aerial. There are some trees. It appears to me that this is roughly the property line. and there are some trees in the area where the proposed dock is going, and I would just want them plotted at the very least and avoided as part of the design. And then certainly, Luke's comments about the 405 Captain's Neck dock, and these are pile-supported structures, so they do allow water to come in and out. When you have a dock, you do have some potential for scouring around the vertical elements, the piles, but it's pretty minimal. And I'm not as concerned about that as I am the configuration and potential conflict with that dock. Now let me just do a new share again and see if I can get to the original permit plan for 405 Captains. In the old days, I never would have had all these tools, but now I feel like I'm fumbling. There it is. Okay, so here's the permit plan that Jim said he was involved with 405 Captains. I believe it was approved in 2019, and there was a prior dock there, which I think was part of the consideration at that time. It was a similar alignment. This one does go beyond the edge of marsh, where the downstep platform is. It is not perpendicular, it is kind of diagonal, but again, there was already disturbance, and I think that was weighed into some of the consideration. And the kayak rack is well beyond the wetlands, and in an area that was, for the most part, edge of lawn or already disturbed. But that's not really what we have with the current application for 64 Down East Lane. So those would be my comments. Let me just see if there's anything else.
What's the aggregate length of this kayak dock?
I'd ask for Jim to scale that off if he has his plans handy.
70 feet,
70?
yeah.
It probably adds up based on the description here. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, we do have that.
It's right on the plans. I'll gladly walk you through that if you like. Kayak rack is located in an area of Phragmites. Typically, we are told by the state to put a kayak rack in the upland portion of the property. It's above the wetlands line. It's in an area that's a pure stand of Phragmites, and it's an open frame structure. It has three 3x6s across the 4-foot width of the proposed structure, and what it does is it holds kayaks and canoes. It would hold two kayaks or two canoes in an area where you simply put the kayak on the dock and pull it down the dock assembly. The 4-foot by 20-foot ramp up, the reason why it's 4-foot by 20-foot, the docks always used to be designed at 4-foot by 12-foot ramp ups, but we are required by the Army Corps of Engineers to elevate a dock 4.5 feet above the grade of vegetated wetlands to the bottom of the girder or the top of the ledger board. So the reason for the long ramp is because Army Corps regulations, which are well-founded and probably not flexible in any way, shape, or form. Same thing at the other end. At the other end of the dock, we have a 20-foot ramp down. Why do we have a 20-foot ramp down? Because we're 4.5 feet above the grade of vegetated wetlands. We have to safely get somebody down to a drop platform. When we drop down on a ramp, we end at a 4-foot by 4-foot landing. That's so you step off the ramp onto a landing and then onto a drop platform. There could be minor changes in design here, and if the board wants to see them, that's fine. Thing to think about is if we push the thing up the creek a little bit, we're going to cross wetlands that are a little bit wider. We're going to end at the marsh, and we're probably not going to change much of anything in terms of the design. We're not going to conflict with the dock at 405 Captain's Neck Lane. In the first place, it's my client's property, and I'm not going to design something that's going to cause a problem with somebody that I currently work for. And the second place, we are headed to the same spot in the creek where it's convenient to put a drop platform and have a ladder down and go into the creek and use a kayak. We could change the shape of the drop platform a little bit. Maybe that would help out. But driving a single piling on either side of the dock in a wetlands area is not going to cause scour. It's not going to cause impacts to the wetlands. The whole thing is designed to meet the Army Corps regulations so that impacts to tidal wetlands are protected. It's a through flow deck over top of an open pile supported dock that's raised to the elevation that's required by the Army Corps after years and years of them studying docks all up and down the coast of the United States. So I'm pretty confident that we have most of that correct. However, if the board has some input on these things, we are certainly going to respond to those. And yes, we could slide it up and down the property line a little bit, but we need to get to the water line. We need to ramp up correctly and make the thing meet the Army Corps standards. Could we put the kayak rack in the lawn? We certainly could. That's fair game. That's easy to do. We could return to you in a couple of weeks and have all that provided to you, and anything else that Chick Voorhees wants to have input on between now and then could be accommodated.
Jim, I don't know if you answered the question or comment about the existing vegetation, this existing tree here. It appears as though that alignment would interfere with some of that existing vegetation.
We'll avoid the tree. We'll meet the concerns and directives of the Zoning Board of Appeals directly, so you don't have to have months and months of negotiation where issues are being avoided. We'll show the tree on the plans and we'll come back to you and resolve those issues so the board is comfortable with the approval that they might want to issue.
One thing I was going to ask before, Jim, is there's a drainage easement. Have you looked at that and if there are any encumbrances with respect to that drainage easement?
Yes, we looked at it. The drainage easement was required as part of the subdivision. And 405 Captain's Neck Lane goes right up to that property line for 64 Down East Lane. In the drainage easement, it was required to make sure that the water was able to go in and out of that arm of Hetty Creek. And I have all that paperwork, Chick. I don't recall exactly where I got it, probably from Andrew Fleiss. And it's more documentation than I could send quickly. But if you want a full copy of that stuff, we're gonna forward you an email and give you all that information at once. Chick, I don't think there's any problem with the subdivision that underlies these properties, and I think the drainage easement was smart. And why the property lines laid out exactly like that, I'm not certain, but I don't think it causes any real issue to this particular application, and we would certainly share it with the board. I already have it.
And last question, which, you know, just looking at this aerial photograph and the lawn areas, some of the landscape beds, would the applicant consider mitigation in the form of lawn reduction and buffering to help offset some of the impacts of the dock structure?
I'll speak to my client and report back to you in that time frame that you may want to continue the hearing.
Chick, I have a few
Oh, sure.
questions. How does this dock compare to the dock that we were just looking at? It seems like it goes up, levels, and then goes down. The dock at 1377 Meadow Lane seems a little bit simpler. Why isn't this as simple as that dock? What about the topography or the
I know that Jim will explain this probably in greater detail because he's dealing with all of the other agencies. But in this case where you have vegetated tidal wetlands, which we may have at 1377, but I believe it met the requirements, there are very specific requirements on elevation above the marsh. And that's how this was designed. So it's basically you're ramping up in an area before you get to the wetlands. It's elevated at 4.5 feet, traversing the wetlands, and then it gradually comes down. And that minimum 4.5 feet, again, Jim can talk about DEC, Army Corps, and what agencies require what, but that is very typical. And it is a question of topography, function, vegetated nature of the wetlands, and you ramp up and ramp down in order to protect the wetlands. Jim, you want to add something to that with respect to the agencies?
Sure, and it's identical at 405 Captain's Neck Lane, which I went to and I measured to make sure Ken Mockridge built the dock correctly. It's 4.5 feet to the bottom of the girder. The ledger boards don't count, but the concept is the Army Corps of Engineers won't approve docks that aren't 4.5 feet above the grade of vegetated tidal wetlands because they want the wetlands vegetation to exist and do well underneath the dock. It's as simple as that. The through flow decking helps. It's 60% transmissive, but no matter where the board might end up with this dock, we would always have to provide exactly the Army Corps specifications or we won't get approval at the federal level. The DEC is, the DEC will require the kayak rack to be out of the wetlands, period. So that's fine. The drop platform is routinely approved by the DEC. It's routinely approved by the Army Corps of Engineers, and we have a ladder down. These things are required by each of the regulatory agencies, and sometimes there's conflicts, but by and large, those conflicts have been resolved, and these types of issues have been understood by the town and the state and the federal government. And with docks in the village, we have to consider how Tin Ho So and the building department regulate the handrails, but in all regards, the design is intended to protect the wetlands. It's an open pile dock with through flow decking that's light transmissive. The handrails are designed to not be visible more than they have to be. And the little drop platform at the end gets people into the creek so that they can use a kayak, and it promotes recreational use of a water body, which the Department of State particularly supports. We always design the docks to be tropical hardwood because that is the easiest way to make sure that there's no treated lumber in use in the town of Southampton. I don't think I have anything else to say in terms of the dock design. But this office tends to be receptive to board input, and I will certainly show where the tree is. I think that's okay. Putting a kayak rack inside the fence area is probably okay. You have to remember, this is a Phragmites shoreline with a strand of wetlands vegetation along the edges. And most of this will not be able to be seen. It's got 15-foot high common reed on either side of it. Moreover, the property owner to the west is Jocko Rittenbow and the extensive wetlands plantings over there, including eastern red cedars and the buffer area above will hide this dock, period. You'll never be able to see anything from the water short of a little drop platform. It will be at the edge. The rest of it's going through Phragmites, and it has a ramp down through the fence to the lawn. So are we near a tree? Maybe we are. We'll certainly respect that village question and find out exactly where that tree lies. And would my client be willing to plant some vegetation along the fence to buffer the wetlands issues? I will talk to him. He's moved his family to this property from a different place in the village, and I think he's very excited about continuing to use the water. That's the whole idea. Use a kayak dock to access the water. But we'll take a look at the mitigation that
There's zero buffer?
the board has looked at, and we'll come back to you.
Okay, and why is it as close to the property line so as to require a setback variance?
There's a very practical reason. This is a shallow arm of Hetty Creek, and we're putting it close to the edge of the property line so we can access the water in the most reasonable way. Same exact reason why 405 Captain's Neck Lane has a dock that's 10 feet off the south property line.
Well, I guess what I'm asking you is, could it be located where it would not require a side yard setback variance?
It doesn't require a side yard variance anyway. 405 Captain's Neck Lane has no variance.
No,
It's a wetland
I'm only
special
talking about this
permit.
application, Jim. It says,
What's that?
it says here that you need a setback variance for an accessory structure.
That's from Alex Wallach, and I spoke to him at the time that he noticed the property, and he told me that he was going to notice it for a variance. My position on that is there's no variance required. There wasn't a variance required at 405 Captain's Neck Lane, and it's doesn't appear to be reflective of village policy to require variances for docks. Moreover,
Jim, a variance is required here.
Really?
It's been
We're gonna
noticed,
submit
and a variance is
variance
required.
discussion from Carl Benincasa in that regard, if that is the position of the village. I really don't believe that that is the case. I don't believe that much has changed in the village code regarding docks since 2019 when I got the permit for Sims Lansing. However, we'll submit the variance discussion to the board for your next meeting, along with making adjustments to the design to meet the village concerns.
So Jim, just to be clear, for our variance criteria, we would like to know whether there was an alternate location that would not require a side yard setback.
Oh, that's okay. I've said that Carl Benincasa and I will address the variance standards, and I already did it. And I did it because Alex Wallach talked to me about it, and I don't really agree that a variance is required for a dock and a side yard. It hasn't been in the past, and I don't believe that it's appropriate that it is in this particular application. However, we will do it, and we will provide that information to the board in good faith, and we'll do it right away. Already wrote it up with Carl, and we'll submit it as part of the application.
Sounds good.
Isn't Carl Southampton Town?
No, he's just their counsel. No, he's not. You're thinking, I know you're thinking. Okay, Jim, can we just adjourn this for all purposes now, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks, hopefully?
Yeah, I'm gonna go home and watch Yankees.
Mr. Chairman, I think somebody wants to be here.
Oh, excuse me. Let's hear from any member of the public who would like to be heard.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Martha Reichert with the firm Toomey Latham Shea, Kelly Dubin, and Corderaro, 33 West 2nd Street, Riverhead, New York. I am here appearing on behalf of the neighbor to the south, 405 Captain's Neck Lane. I have a handout that I'd like to give to the board. It's already been emailed, but it'll help sort of illustrate some of the issues and concerns that we have with this application. Is there a stamp? Building department.
How do you want to do that, Mark?
Stamp it and we used to do it. It's all coming back to me now.
Right. But is this information that should have been in the,
Yeah, submit it sooner.
I'm not the applicant.
yeah, so,
We
because
gotcha.
nobody else could see it, that's,
We have a digital version.
that doesn't answer my question. Was this submitted to the building department? No.
No, but the neighbor wouldn't be required to do that.
No.
Too many copies, but here you go.
Do you have a copy?
Oh, of course, check. There you go. And for council.
Thank you.
So for those of us on Zoom, it's going to be hard to read.
No, we're gonna post it, I think.
Charles, will you be able to pull it up? Okay.
Can you tell me your name again?
Sure. It's Martha Reichert from Toomey Latham Shea, Kelly
Martha.
Dubin, and Corderaro. So I'm here to represent 405 Captain's Neck Lane. As a sort of first matter, we have concerns, many of which were touched upon by Chick, but primarily that the location of the dock will impede our client's use and navigability on this narrow portion of the creek. We have concerns about the buffer and also concerns about this easement. The dock on 405 is not exactly the same because it's not located in this drainage easement, which runs to the benefit of the village of Southampton. Now, the handout that I have given you contains, and I'll describe it until they can get it up, but I have the 1962 aerial, I have the 1976 aerial, a survey of my client's property to the south, and then the applicant's surveys that he submitted to the trustees and also to the village zoning board. And the purpose of what I have this here for is I believe that the underlying permit that was recently granted by the trustees of the freeholders did not take into account this drainage easement, but it did not also take into account that this is not a natural creek. This is a dug drainage channel. It's shown on the 2019 drawings and surveys that were prepared by InterScience, but not shown here, indicating that it is an artificial extension. The 1962 aerial shows you what this creek looked like, and then the following page on the 1976 aerial shows you how much this was widened pursuant to the drainage channel. Some of you may or may not know this, but I used to be counsel to the Southampton Town Trustees, so this is an area that I know quite a bit about. So with respect to the permit that was granted by the trustees, it's conditioned upon the receipt of all permits, including the one from this board, but I think that there are issues with the trustees. There are jurisdictional defects with the trustees' permit, but it's also something that this board needs to look at because, you know, I've read the deeds for these two properties, and normally when you have waterfront property, the waterfront boundary is described as going to the waters of such and such body of water and then along the waters of that body. You don't have that here because, again, this is a dug artificial canal. So the meets and bounds descriptions for both of these properties, and you can see in the 1962 aerial and the 1974, I'm sorry, this 1976 aerial, these have the tax map overlay. And as you can see, the property boundary for 405 Captain's Neck goes all the way to the boundary of 64 Down East Lane. So I believe that we have some underlying title jurisdictional, and we need to look at that easement. Jim says he has it. Because of the county shutdown, I haven't been able to get it, but I should have it within the next couple of days. But I think these are things that council will have to look into, the applicant will need to address. Again, we have concerns about the navigability, and so I think that if there is a way to position the dock elsewhere, but I think before we can even talk about putting the dock in a different location, we need to find out whether or not there's even permission pursuant to the easement and the other underlying title issues before we can discuss the location of this dock. Does the board have any other questions for me?
No, we're gonna keep it open, Martha.
Thank you.
But I actually do have a question.
Sure.
So on the 1976 aerial, are you saying that because the tax map lines show 405 Captain's Neck as fully enveloping the channel, that it is their property? Because it seems to be like there's just sort of an overlay mistake here, because every line on this.
No, the 76 picture itself doesn't line up perfectly.
Right.
It's more there just to show what the shape of the properties are. At the end of the day, the controlling location of the boundaries will be the meets and bounds contained within each property's deeds.
Right.
And I think that that needs to be staked out in addition to showing what the actual distance between the two docks will be. They're depicted on Inner Sciences drawings, but they're not with any dimensions. And so really we should be looking at this on a survey, in addition to sort of looking at the easement itself. Because as I was saying, the dock on 405 Captain's Neck Lane is not located within that easement. And again, that easement, if you think about it, is because at the time it was granted, this wasn't underwater land. This was actual land, right? And that changes a lot of what we're looking at here with respect to the trustees' jurisdiction and everything else.
Can you help us by providing the
Sure.
deeds for 405?
Sure, you know, I apologize, I normally like to walk into this with a better put-together written statement, and that will be forthcoming. We were just recently retained, so this was what I was able to put together just as I was doing my due diligence.
This is great, so I just wonder if you could locate the surveys for 64 and 405 in the deeds.
Sure.
I mean, you can submit it whenever whenever it's ready.
Maybe-
Yes, I see we have 405.
Maybe a question for Jeff or for Chick. Are docks allowed to cross village easements?
I think we have to look at the easement.
You say no.
Well, no, I'm not saying no, it depends on what the language of the easement is.
I understand.
So we need to look at that first. Each easement is unique.
What year was the easement written in?
I don't know the year. We only have a book and page library, which is listed on the applicant's survey. Let's see. The second to last sheet in my handout shows a page and library number of...
5780, page 86.
Thank you. I don't have my reading glasses. Thanks, Chick. Based on those numbers, I would say that it's probably going to be something in the 70s or 80s. Maybe the late 60s, it's hard to say.
Would an easement even contemplate something like a dock?
Well, you know, again, it's hard to say because it started off as a drainage easement, and as Jim said while he was speaking, it seems to be, and I'm going to take his word for it at this point until I can review it, that it came out of a subdivision process. So, you know, it may be one of those things where we look at what that subdivision file is, but you can see clearly from the 1962 aerial, aside from the fact that this was all farmland, it was a very small amount of wetlands contained in sort of that shared property boundary area. And where it was dug out is completely on within the property boundaries of 405 Captain Neck Lane, more or less.
But
because I'm looking at an aerial, potentially,
Yeah.
right? And that's why I would like to see, you know, historical surveys and also the two docks in conjunction with each other.
There may be a subdivision map
There may be a subdivision map.
with some covenants. But yeah, whatever you can help us with as far as, and we'll ask the building department as well what they might have, but a subdivision map with any CNRs might be helpful.
Yeah. everything's a little slow right now because of the county shutdown and, you know, not to beat a dead horse, but we're just retained, so this is my preliminary due diligence, the best I could do in terms of just looking at aerials and what's available in the town's GIS records, et cetera. So, you know, I think our request to the board at this point is that we don't want to see the hearing closed. We think there are some serious factual issues that need to be investigated a little bit more, aside from our client's overall concerns about the placement of the dock and its ability to impact his use as well. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll motion to adjourn for all purposes, case number 3147, Andrew Fleiss, 64 Downey's Lane. Can I have a second?
I second that.
And then all in favor of adjourning for all purposes, case number 3147, Andrew Fleiss?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Julia. Okay, so we're going to move to case number 3149, Claire and David Kershey, 37 Pheasant Close North.
Mr. Chairman, in the old days, I would typically get up at this time.
The guy you're going to...
Based on Zoom meetings, I might just hang back, but
Thank you very much for your help
all
tonight.
right, thank you very much. Great to see you all in person.
Thanks, Chick.
Thank
Have
you.
a-
Good to
have a
see you.
wonderful evening.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Louis Puccio. I'm representing Schiffer Engineering and my client, David Kershey, in his application to the zoning board. I do have a thumb drive with some plans that I'd like to share, if that's okay. Yes. Oh, you have it. Maybe check this one. I think that should have everything. Yep. Gotcha. Okay. So here we have a case of a detached garage that we can see on the site plan on the, basically along that northwest property line. And then we also have a new front porch, if you zoom in on that site plan up there.
The top.
Yes.
Excuse me, can I ask that you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Louis Puccio. I'm
you.
representing Schiffer Engineering and my client, David Kershey. Right. So here we have a garage that is encroaching, I believe it's 20.13 feet from the accessory setback. It's about 10 feet from that property line. And then we have the front porch, which is about, I believe it's 17 feet from the principal building, or no, accessory, also accessory setback line. So in this case, as we have the garage shown, it does not produce any undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood. This being that the garage that we have shown, it's set back 10 feet, so it won't create any kind of undesirable shading, or there's also a row of privets along that property line, so the majority of the garage will be shaded by that row of 10-foot high privets. I believe we also did not put any windows on that side of the garage. If we go down, if you scroll down on that plan, there should be an elevation showing this.
What?
Yes, just a couple of sheets down. If you keep going. So we can see on the garage there on those elevations. If you scroll down a little bit more, thank you. I guess we did have windows, but if need be, we can remove them from the side that abuts the neighbor's property line. In regards to the front porch, this is also not creating any undesirable change in the neighborhood. Many of the properties in this neighborhood do have covered front porches of similar nature. In regards to the pyramid encroachment, we could try to lower the pitch of the garage roof. However, it would create an undesirable separation and difference in the architecturals between the existing building and also the new proposed detached garage. None of the variances are necessarily substantial. They're all fairly minor with regards to what's been proposed, and does not have any physical or environmental effect on the neighborhood. And these variances are not self-created due to the fact that these accessory structures have been placed in what we believe is optimal to keep the architecturals in sync while also the functionality of the proposed structures.
Do any board members have any questions, concerns?
I have some comments. I beg to differ. I don't know why the garage would not be functional if it would actually meet the zoning code. I believe that all of these variances are unnecessary, that someone needs to figure out
Well,
how.
the front porch the front porch isn't necessarily self-created because the house is right up against the principal setback line. So in order to add anything to the front facade of the house, it would require a variance.
Correct.
Was this house built without an attached garage?
So originally it had an attached garage, and the homeowner would like to convert into a ground level master suite for his elderly parents who plan to move in. So to combat this, we've created a detached garage. It's a separate space for him to work on his cars or whatever he may need to do.
Do we have a plan of what's actually there now that are you
If
just
you
showing
zoom-
us, we're missing something here. Where is the actual state of the,
If you look at the title sheet and you scroll down a little bit, and to the bottom left, there is an existing survey.
we need, there's a lot of pieces of paper, but
Can you put it on the screen?
Do you need me to come?
and excuse me, where are the plans? Are you not, as far as I'm concerned, we're only getting part of the story. You want to change the existing garage into a habitable space, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, Susan
And-
brings up a good point. Where are you with your lot
Okay.
GFA calculations?
So, in this case, because it's a 60,000 square foot lot, the maximum allowable size of a garage, I believe, is 720, and I believe our garage is under that. As far as GFA, we're not adding GFA because the garage is detached and it's under that regulation, and then.
But the existing attached garage wouldn't have calculated towards GFA, but now it will.
Now it does, so you're correct, and I believe we do have a GFA calc that shows that we are within the allowable GFA, if you scroll up a little bit on there. And then to the right, we have a bunch of tables. We also have the lot coverage, which is within allowable zoning. Go right a little bit and then up more. I believe that's where if you scroll up a little bit.
Even with that tennis court, you're clear on the lot coverage?
Yes.
You're only like an acre and a quarter, right?
Yes, it's 60,000 square feet, the lot.
Acre and a half.
Acre and a half.
Well, from my perspective, you're cramming a lot onto the property, and I do think it's detrimental. This property could be developed within the lines of the zoning code, and that is what I personally expect.
Julia, do you have any comments?
I'm just trying to figure out the tables at the moment, Mark. Give me a sec.
Well, I mean, while you're looking at that, I mean, the
Yeah.
one thing I can't really agree with is if you're asking for a garage to be located less than 10 feet from a property line, and
Yeah, well-
the setback is 30 feet, that's substantial. As one of our criterion to follow,
Well,
that's a,
Oh, it is
there's
30.
no doubt in this board's mind that that would be substantial.
Okay.
Also, I think frankly, having the windows on that side yard is problematic for the neighbor.
Right. So we can certainly work with that and remove those windows.
Yeah, I think you need a new location for the garage. Push it back,
Push it towards the house.
push it behind the house, you know, take care of your need for a variance for a accessory structure in a side yard. So push it back, maybe decrease it so it's only a one-car garage. Then you can move it west so you could eliminate the need for the side yard variance. Lessening the square footage will shorten your rise and run.
Right.
So you'll probably take care of your height
Mm-hmm.
variance request. I don't, speaking only for myself, I don't really have a problem with the front porch. But I think you can do the garage in a way that doesn't need any variances.
Okay.
I also don't, I'm not sure that I think the calculations are accurate, because I think the garage is not included in the calculations on that chart, and if I'm wrong about that, I just have to look at it again.
Yeah, we'll
But-
take another look at the
And we can
calcs,
certainly
but
verify them, but we're
make
fairly
sure, make sure that you are now including the former garage in your GFA
Right.
calculation for the main house.
So I just think, I mean, consider reducing how substantial the variance request might be and whether there's an alternate location for the garage primarily. And then Julia and the rest of the board members will go through the numbers and we'll have more questions, but let's adjourn for all purposes, if that works for you.
Yeah, just one more thing. In your chart for the gross floor area analysis, because this is all part of one building permit, right?
Yes.
Okay, so please do a existing column and a proposed column.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
Does the lot coverage look accurate to you?
The lot coverage should correspond to the site plan as well.
Mhm.
Like each structure has a square footage, and then it should correlate to the table.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
check it. I'll check it.
Just think that
I mean,
the
a
existing-
tennis court, you know, eats up, like if on a 1 acre lot, a tennis court takes half your lot coverage.
Right.
You do have an acre and a half, so I imagine you're probably good,
Mm-hmm.
but just double check all your calculations.
Yes, we
okay?
will definitely do that.
Thought Ms. McCormick had a comment?
Julia, did you have a comment? Or do you want to?
Nothing to add more than that about I just want to make sure that the calculations are really looked at.
Right,
Well,
it's
Louis-
like the lot coverage doesn't change. You're adding a garage, but it's not mentioned? It isn't counted in? I guess if it's detached, it may not be, it's not counted, but it just looks strange to me.
Well, we
Is
count
the
the
house-
lot coverage.
Yeah.
The measurable when the garage becomes habitable, that changes the gross floor area tremendously.
Yeah,
Right.
correct, to the tune of probably 600 square feet or so. But when you do existing versus proposed, all those things will be
Yeah, it'll
clarified.
clear it up, right?
Okay, so why don't I motion to adjourn for all
Mr.
purposes?
Chairman, I didn't know if there were anybody in the public on Zoom or.
Antoinette, is there anybody on Zoom?
I have Mark Schiffer, but he doesn't have his hand up. I'm sure he's just listening in.
He's probably just listening.
Checking up on you.
Yeah.
Is there any member of the public who would like to be heard? Okay, then we'll motion to adjourn for all purposes. Case number 3149, Claire and David Kershey, 37 Pheasant Close North. Can I have a second?
Second that.
And all in favor? We're just adjourning for all purposes, case number 3149. All
Aye.
in favor?
Aye.
And then I will motion to adjourn the meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals, public hearing, Tuesday, October 11th. Can I have a second?
Second that.
Second,
And all in favor?
Aye.
aye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Thank
good
you.
job.